baseball games that was held at Old Memorial Stadium. And here, beauty, did you recognize this one? He spoke just in front of me. Knox Beavers. He did have a haircut. I don't want to give him too hard a time. Only Smith Ellis, he was the high school, and that's Libby Reader was the last name. He was that kid boy, had him up there, and they were he had the high school. And what I made was the last really everything they said about it. And here's Willie Marino. Willie hadn't seen that weight in years. Brown, you might have to help me identify something. This guy is Bobby Walker right here. Hey, buddy. And this Stowe Hansky here. And Eddie Gray. Okay, there's Tommy Gentry, present school board member. And there's Red Eye Smith. Can't see my notes. And this is Linda Hannah Bossy, Steve Bossy's wife. And here is Joy Clark and the Oils. Mr. Robbie. Here's Wayne, Stag. Patty House got it. And here's Old Lee Farm. That's back there. And here's what the old Brigadier used. If you look down at the bottom row there, the second one on the right, just like Winnie Brown. When she was talking about sponsoring the annual, when they started with George, you know, and he came up, and like I've always told George, he's always been tight if he's worried about a nickel. And here, yeah, Betty Bailey is here when she was the drum major for the Robert E. Lee Band. Here's Lucy, very excited kid. Here's the Robert E. Lee Band on stage, and I believe this was in the old auditorium that Knox was talking about when the fun of basketball was. And then also here is the Robert E. Lee Band way yesterday, 1950, when they went to Chicago yesterday to buy the international. Here's Super Sound. Steve, that's 1960s. 30 years, and it took me all that time to get us into the band uniform, the year uniform, where they had school colors. This concludes the slide presentation. Thank you.
I want to thank all of our panelists. That was so interesting. It's real fun to see the pictures of some of the people who still live in Baytown. At this time, we still have some time. The library closes at 9 o'clock, and we would love to invite any of you to come up and tell us about some of the things that you remember, either as a student or in some connection with the schools. Would anybody like to come? Mr. Kelly?
As we heard these folks talking, I thought of a couple of things. First, I'm not originally from this area. I came down with my wife and family in 1952, so I'm a fairly recent addition. But I thought about that when Mr. Green was talking. I thought about that first integrated faculty meeting we had. A number of us from Robert E. Lee were invited, I guess the whole faculty, anyway. I was president of the teachers' organization that year. And so they looked to me as the leader and the spokesman. Well, I don't know how Carver felt, I can imagine. But I know that I was scared stiff. We walked into Carver Gym. The Carver teachers were lined up on the other side of the gymnasium. The lead teacher took the one nearest the door. And they looked at me to see what I was going to do. Well, I didn't know quite what to do. I walked across and started talking to some of the Carver people. And very quickly, we got to be close friends. Then, one thing that stood out in my memory, first off, I've kept a diary since 1927. Every night, and since I've been married, my wife says, put that darn thing away and get in bed, because I always have to review the events of the day and put them down. I remember, well, I was given a job when yes, I don't remember quite when, but I was on the speaker for Robert E. Lee. And then when they opened up I did the JV game. Oh, and worked in the stands too. And then when Sterling opened up, I was in charge of speaking at the ball games. Of course, for the first couple of years, Sterling didn't do very much. The first year we didn't have a varsity team at all. They played JV schedule. And then the next year, we were given an opportunity to play varsity sports. And I'll never forget the first time that Sterling beat Lee. The ball was down about the old 5-yard line. Lee's 5-yard line. Of course, it was just a fluke. See, Lee could never beat, or rather Sterling could never beat Lee. Well, they tried, again, 5-yard line, and they tried a lateral pass behind the line of scrimmage. Russell Clark, who was the defensive end of Lee, just happened to be in Lee's backfield right quick. He grabbed that ball, took 2 steps into the end zone. Sterling won the game. That's all.
Would someone else like to come up? Mrs. Green, did you tell me that you had some anecdotes to tell? Thank you. And I think my husband was sending me back home that particular day. I came to school and the secretary said, Father has called a sub. They called him Father. Father has called a sub. I said, oh, I know better than that. He said, yes, he has. And so he said, Mrs. Green, you can have the whole day off because I called a sub in your place. I said, but I know why. He said, that's why I called a sub. I appreciate that, but I wanted to share with you, I had the opportunity to serve on the production committee for the first music curriculum guide in the school district. And I was very thankful to Mr. Aceto, who was our former music coordinator. At that time, we had not integrated. I don't drink coffee, I drink tea. And so Mr. Seal said, now Geraldine, so you'll be meeting at the school administration building. And have this after the coffee, but I don't drink coffee, so you drink some anyway. And feel free to eat donuts and feel free to go to the restaurant. I said, okay, those things, I ate donuts. But he came in, have you had your coffee? I said, no, I have not. And he said, well, it's okay, we have coffee. But I had a chance to serve with some outstanding music teachers in the production committee for the music curriculum. I was very thankful for that. And that led to other things. Mr. Seal encouraged me to attend Columbia University, Teachers College in Columbia University, because they had a good program, a piano program there, and he wanted me to meet Mr. Pace. I went that summer in 1962. I just received a master's in 62 in May, and I made application to attend. I did attend, but Mr. Pace was on sabbatical leave, so I didn't get a chance to study on him, but I had a good teacher. Mrs. Sadat was a very excellent teacher, and I was happy that I had that experience, and I was encouraged to go. I served in this district from 1954 until 1975, and I was invited to Texas Southern University as part-time, as the alumni director, and after I got there, I had to serve as part-time alumni director and part-time assistant professor of music. I've enjoyed those years and at the university and being away from the school district. But I became full-time in 81, and I still have the honor of working with teachers, in fact, working with students, teaching them how to teach children music. At first, I missed my children because when I got to the university, I was referring to my class as children. Okay, boys and girls, and I had out class, and I had to graduate and say Miss or Mr. because they are adults there. But I wanted to thank the school district for the progress that they made, and only thing I feel that they have not made progress in, and that's in their administrators, the non-administrators, especially black administrators. There is nothing but they have one
heard back there. I know I didn't hear too much. Forgot my hearing aid. Anyway, a lot of things that people around here don't realize that Robert E. Lee, I want to speak from the standpoint of vocational education. Now, Robert E. Lee, how many of you remember Dr. Harmon Loman? Came here as superintendent 1936 to 1940. Dr. Loman left Stephen F. Austin as a college professor to get into administration to install in the school system or try to teach people how to work. Now, his idea was that it was just as much a school system's responsibility to teach a bricklayer, a motor mechanic, as it was teach a lawyer, preacher, or anybody else. Teach him what he needed to know to make a living. That was Dr. Loman's philosophy. But fortunately, I had Dr. Loman 4 years at Stephen F. Austin. I'd also worked 5 years as a research chemist at a glass blower out the refinery. And I grew up around the sawmill, so I knew some of the background of working people, or thought I did. Anyway, when Dr. Loman came to Baytown, he asked me if I'd come down here and start a vocational program, if that was what he wanted to do. Well, that just suited me very, very fine. So I was teaching vocational agriculture in Reminiscence County at the time. So I came to Baytown in August of 1936 to meet with Dr. Loman and the school board. And the program that he was interested in at that time was called Diversified Occupations. That was where that's at high school level. Now the high school people was teaching what we call industrial education, industrial shops, where the kid was actually trained to do mechanical work, but primarily it was limited to mechanical work, machine shop, some welding, building trades, and then vocational agriculture and vocational homemaking. I think Ms. Brown was one of the first vocational homemaker teachers in this country. As I remember, I think she fits along about that category. Anyway, we want to start what we call a diversified occupation. That's where the kids work a half a day, go to school a half a day. Now, one thing that's seldom known in this area, that Robert E. Lee was selected the 5th school in the United States to try that program out to see if it would work. It was purely an experimental thing. We'll let the kids work a half a day and go to school a half a day. And it worked. This is just a little thing, a little incident, I guess you might say. Our school principals at that time were strictly the finest people you could find in Texas, but they were strictly academic, so to speak, from my point of view and from Dr. Loman's point of view. So we had to get a wedge in some way. So Dr. Loman, first day I was here, he sent me out to talk to the principal at the high school, who was also dean of the junior college. Now, at that time, they had an assistant dean of the college who also ran the college. The dean of the high school, the principal of the high school was dean of the college, but he left the administration of the college over to the assistant dean, who happened to be Emory Anderson at the time. Anyway, I went out to see this principal. Wasn't received too. This is one of the finest men I ever saw, I ever hoped to see. But he didn't believe in vocational education at all. Now, we was talking, and he was telling me that there was no use in spending any time talking about that. It wasn't going to put it in his school system. And I'd been invited to come from Rose County to Baytown to meet with the school board that night. So I wasn't going to miss that opportunity. Anyway, the principal, Mr. Sparks, you all know him, he's one of the finest men ever lived. he said that he couldn't put that in my school system because we're strictly here to run a college preparatory program. And I don't remember just how it wound up, but anyway, I asked him, he says, shop don't have any place in this school system. A lot of things don't. But anyway, what it amounted to was that I asked him then, I said, well, Mr. Sparks, do you teach Shakespeare in your school? Yes, sir. Well, why do you teach Shakespeare in your school? Because it's very cultural, and it has cultural aspects and whatnot. I said, well, now, Mr. Sparks, this is, you show me, do you teach blueprint reading? That's what, do you teach blueprint reading? No, nobody ever heard of teaching blueprint reading in high school. Well, Mr. Sparks, you show me a boy that can read a blueprint, and I'll get him a job. How many can you get a job of reading Shakespeare? And I think that cracked the nut.
Thank you so much. Mr. Davis. Okay, no further time.
I wouldn't miss an opportunity to say how much I love Winnie Brown and how much I appreciate the opportunity I had to work with her years ago in designing Sterling High School. I wouldn't miss the opportunity to tell you that I think Knox Beavers is one of the most fantastic public servants that this community or any other has ever seen. I appreciate him. Appreciate Eddie Frank Green, the contribution he's made to our community, and to Henry, one of the kindest and finest men I've ever known. I appreciate him. I want to tell you two funny stories. One about Robert E. Lee and one about Ross Sterling, involving some of the people you've heard mentioned here tonight. Tommy Gentry hadn't been in Baytown long. He was a student of Robert E. Lee, and Holly McLemore was an assistant principal. Tommy, even then, had a gift of gab, and he one time used that gift too much, and he was sent to the principal's office for talking. And he told Mr. McLemore, to whom he reported, he said, I think there's something you ought to know before we get too much into this conversation. Mr. McLemore said, what's that? He said, you don't know who my daddy is, do you? Mr. McLemore said, no, I don't know who your daddy is. He said, he's George Gentry, superintendent of school. He said, is that right? He says, I have something real special for you. And I understand that Tommy never did tell Holly McLemore or anybody else who his daddy was. Holly McLemore gave him the toughest licking. You ever heard of that's a true story. Do you remember some of the male assistant principals you had at Ross Sterling, Miss Brown? Was Don Trueheart one of them? George Perkins one? Had any others? Okay. This story involves 3 assistant principals at Ross Sterling School. It's also a true story. And involves the 2 men I just mentioned and one other. There was a call came into Ross Sterling High School while these men were all serving from an irate parent. This man was very angry because one of the men I just mentioned had disciplined his son. And he says to the person who took the telephone call, he said, I'm going to come up to that school and I'm going to mop up the ground and I'm going to tell you his name is initials is George Perkins. And so Don Trueheart and the other assistant principal said, they rushed in there and they found little George. And he said, hey George, this guy, Mr. So-and-so, you're mad about your copying his son. He says, we're going to have to take you and hide you out. So
off the entryway to the balcony of the auditorium, one to the left and one to the right. And these rooms were not designed for anything but books. They weren't designed for people or anything like that. So they didn't have much light, no air conditioning, anything like that. But surely enough, the two principals caught George Perkins in one of those rooms, locked the door. And then they, went on downstairs and went about their appointed task. And of course, he was busy and all that. And about 9 o'clock that night, the phone rang, and Ann Trueheart said, "John, honey, it's for you." And John looked at the phone, and this voice said, "John, did you let George out?" He said, "No, I didn't let him out. Did you let him out?" I said, "Oh, my, get back. I'll be right to get you." So one ran by and got the other, and they ran over to Ross Sterling High School, and they unlocked the door, and things were simple then, no alarms or anything like that. So they went on up to the second floor there, and they tiptoed up there and knocked on the door, and this voice says, I said, who is it? So Ron says, "George, that guy just left, but I think everything's all right." Good night. Thank you.
Anybody else want to add a story? Did you want to come back and add something?
Couple of things I would like to mention here. One was that, I don't know how many of you have heard of vocational clubs, industrial vocational clubs of America, VIC, VICA they call it. Anyway, first club that was ever organized in the United States, VICA, was organized at Robert E. Lee High School in 1936. Another thing was that, I think I said the thing cracked the nut. Another thing was, at that time, the state would pay the school system 75% of the teacher's salary up to $2,400 to try that for them out. And that only left $600 for the local school to pay. So I think that was another lick on